Am I the asshole for refusing to raise my sister's gifted demon child? It started with a phone call and 4 cursed words. Can you babysit him? I wish I'd let it go to voicemail. I wish I'd flung my phone out the window and changed my name to something like Todd Chainsaw, moved to the mountains, and raised goats. But hindsight is 20/20, and unfortunately, I picked up. Amanda? I said, recognizing my sister's dramatic side before I even heard her voice. Hey, she drawled. That's her I'm about to ruin your life but make it sound like self-care tone. You sound suspiciously relaxed, I said, immediately suspicious. Yeah. I'm actually calling from a sound bath ceremony in Sedona. Sedona. Of course. So listen, she said, her voice suddenly urgent in that I'm going to pretend this is a normal request way she does. Can you babysit him? Now, you'd think him would come with context. Or even a name. But no. Because when you are Amanda, the sun rises and sets on the assumption that everyone around you is fully briefed on your chaotic orbit. So I already knew she meant her 9-year-old son, Zane. Zane. My nephew. My projectile of entropy in the shape of a child. Let me be clear. I love my nephew. I do. But Zane is, how do I put this delicately? If Dennis the Menace and Damien from The Omen had a baby, and that baby was raised by feral raccoons and exclusively fed Monster Energy drinks, it would still be less chaotic than Zane. Amanda continued, just 2 weeks. That's all. Me and Steve need this wellness retreat. Things have been a little, energetically misaligned. Steve. Fiancé number 3. He wore toe shoes unironically and once said kombucha had rewritten his DNA. I wouldn't trust Steve to align a chair, let alone a chakra. I don't know, Amanda, I said, already bracing for the guilt trip. He's gifted, she insisted. He sees energies that most adults are too closed off to perceive. He's like a little shaman. What she meant was, he once told his teacher she had the scent of decaying souls, and then tried to exorcise the smartboard with a pencil wand he called the spirit jabber. Gifted. Right. But she caught me at a weak moment. I had nothing urgent going on, unless you count finally watching Better Call Saul without interruptions as urgent. Spoiler, I should have stuck with Saul. Fine, I said. 2 weeks. That's it. Day 1. Zane arrived like a small tornado wearing dinosaur pajamas and carrying a plastic bag labeled Crystal Armory. Inside, quartz, rose quartz, obsidian, something that looked suspiciously like a driveway rock, and a Capri Sun he called Sacred Juice. Before I could even offer him a snack or attempt a civil greeting, he sprinted past me shouting, I have to summon the water gods before sunset. What followed was 3 hours of chaos that ended with me standing in ankle-deep water in my upstairs bathroom, watching my toilet overflow like Niagara Falls because Zane had tried to create tornadoes for the fish gods using my toilet brush, 2 rubber bands, and a lot of unholy optimism. I called a plumber. $500 later, the bathroom was fixed. When I told Zane he was grounded, he responded like any spiritually in tune, gifted child would, by placing a dead bird under my pillow. Let me say that again, a dead bird under my pillow. I discovered it around midnight, after feeling something cold and feathery touch my cheek in the dark. I screamed loud enough to activate 3 different neighbor dogs and probably trigger an earthquake somewhere in California. When I called Amanda, because, dead bird, she was in a yurt somewhere in New Mexico doing silent breathwork with Steve. Oh, honey, she said when I told her what happened, that's a misunderstood offering. He's just honoring your aura. I wanted to honor her aura with a shovel. Day 4. Zane told me he could hear ants talking. I left a voicemail. Then 2 more. Then I tried Steve's number. It went straight to a chakra cleansing hotline. I wish I was joking. I emailed. I DM'd her on Instagram. I even commented under her latest post, which showed her meditating on a cliff with the caption, "When you align with the cosmos, you don't need a clock." What? The hell? Week 3. I had to tell my boss I was working remotely. He asked why I could hear tribal drumming in the background. I said it was a documentary. In truth, Zane had fashioned a drum set out of pots, pans, and something that used to be part of my blender. He was summoning what he called the Thunder Guardians. In the living room, my landlord came by unannounced and saw Zane blessing the mailbox with ancestral fire. He asked if I was running a cult. I didn't have the energy to deny it. Week 4. I stopped asking when Amanda would come back. At some point, I think I just broke. I started accepting things I once would have called 911 over. Like the time I found a squirrel in my freezer wearing a crown made of gum wrappers. Or when I woke up to chanting and a chalk-drawn pentagram in my garage. Zane told me he was protecting the home from soul thieves. At this point, I didn't even ask for clarification. Week 6. 6 weeks. 42 days. 1,008 hours of energetically gifted chaos. Amanda finally texted. One text. No apology. Staying a bit longer. Steve and I are thinking about opening a spiritual retreat center in Peru. Zane's with you, right? LOL. He's your little shadow warrior now. Kisses. I stared at my phone for a full minute, unsure whether to scream, cry, or simply walk into the woods and never return. Shadow warrior? Kisses? I looked over at Zane, who was attempting to teach the neighbor's parrot how to speak fluent bird Latin. I don't even know what that means. But it involved a sock puppet and a lot of glitter. I sighed. And then, like some kind of parenting Stockholm syndrome, I handed him a juice box. By month 2, my life had officially transitioned from a quirky sitcom to a psychological thriller with supernatural undertones. Gone were the days when I thought the biggest challenge would be convincing a child to eat vegetables. Now, I was navigating uncharted territories of child-led government, spectral diplomacy, and condiments being used in occult rituals. Zane had, at some point between the 4th and 5th week, declared himself head of the house. He made a sash out of duct tape and a pillowcase that said so in permanent marker. He wore it with authority, and sometimes a colander on his head, while conducting nightly meetings in the living room. Attendance at these meetings was mandatory for his cabinet, which consisted of my cat Lionel, a sock puppet named General Toadface, and the vacuum cleaner, whom Zane had appointed as President Hoover. I walked in on one of these summits. Zane was pacing like a dictator in training, shouting about rationing the goldfish crackers and launching psychic surveillance on the neighbors. Lionel looked deeply concerned. President Hoover was unplugged and probably happier that way. When I tried to interject, Zane looked at me and said, "The civilian population must not interfere with matters of the council. You are dismissed, peasant." I dismissed myself. To the fridge. For wine. Now, one might think, well, why not send the kid to school? Oh, sweet, naive viewer. Amanda had unschooled Zane. Not homeschooled. Unschooled. I had assumed this was code for I got bored being a parent. But apparently, it's a real educational philosophy that involves letting the child learn naturally through their environment. Sounds great if your child is Marie Curie. Less great if your child is summoning thunder spirits and attempting to reprogram your thermostat with crystal runes. Still, I tried. He was humming. The sock puppet was positioned at one of the points. Lionel was, once again, caught in the role of unwilling familiar. And President Hoover was propped up in the corner wearing my old necktie. "What are you doing?" I asked, exhausted. "Channeling the forgotten wisdom of the jam demons," he said. Of course. Silly me. I took a picture and texted Amanda. Her response? A string of laughing emojis, followed by, "He's exploring his inner mythos. Don't suppress him." Glowing star. Suppress him? Lady, I was trying not to exorcise him. At this point, I started keeping a journal. Not for memory's sake. For evidence. It happened on a Tuesday, the kind of Tuesday that starts with spilled cereal and ends with you Googling if children can be legally declared rogue nations. Zane tried to sell my laptop. Not online. That would be too normal. He invited a man from Craigslist, an actual adult stranger, to our front porch. I was in the kitchen when I noticed someone outside, shaking hands with Zane. I opened the door mid-negotiation. Zane, it's a top model. Very little adult interference. In exchange, I need access to the ancient pirate secrets. The man blinked. So, not for cash? Zane, gold. Cursed treasure. A map. Or rum, if you have it. I shut the door and screamed into a dish towel for 5 full minutes. Afterward, I confiscated all electronics and declared an emergency family meeting. Participants. Myself, hair unwashed, I Twitch active. My mother, spiritual crystal collector and enabler. My father, stoic, mostly silent, selectively deaf. Amanda, joining via Zoom from Bali, naturally. Zane, now demanding to be called Captain Brainflame and wearing an eye patch made of a post-it note. I laid it out. All of it. The toilet flood. The jelly pentagram. The vacuum cabinet. The fact that I now flinch at the sound of glitter bottles shaking. My bank account was hemorrhaging from therapy, plumbers, pest control, don't ask, and now potential Craigslist pirates. Amanda gasped. Not at the damage. No. At my tone. You're crushing his creative chakra, she said. His creative chakra? Mother chimed in. He's a special soul. Very in touch with unseen realms. You were always so rigid. Rigid? I was one graham cracker short of a full breakdown. I hadn't had a full night of sleep in 41 days. I was bleeding money, my sanity was in shambles, and I was pretty sure President Hoover, the vacuum, had been plotting my demise. Amanda, from her cabana in Bali, had the audacity to say, maybe you're not cut out to be part of Zane's journey. Zane nodded solemnly. Some people can't handle the flame. I looked at the Zoom call. I looked at my parents, who were sipping herbal tea like this was an episode of Enlightened Chaos, the home edition. And then I snapped. Maybe, I said, calmly at first, I'm not cut out to raise someone else's feral art project. Amanda's jaw dropped. There was a pause, a tense, awkward pause filled with the metaphysical sound of a chakra shattering. She hung up. Just like that. Zoom, disconnected. Captain Brainflame, the council will hear of this. Mom sighed and said something about alignment. Dad shrugged and asked what was for dinner. And me? I poured a glass of wine, stared out the window, and seriously considered applying to that goat farm commune in Vermont. There's a point in every hostage negotiation where even the negotiator starts considering joining the criminals. That point for me came on a Thursday morning, after a full-blown meltdown involving duct tape, maple syrup, and my neighbor's garden gnome. I won't elaborate. You don't want to know. The gnome certainly doesn't. I looked around at the living room, maple footprints on the ceiling, a sock puppet tied to the ceiling fan like a prisoner of war, President Hoover in pieces, and Zane standing triumphantly in a cape made of tin foil, announcing something about the uprising of the sticky ones. That was it. I packed his things. Well, some of them. Others had merged with the spiritual detritus of my home and were no longer recognizable as objects of this realm. I loaded him into the car, activated the GPS, and drove 6 hours straight to the doorstep of Amanda's ex-husband, Zane's biological father. Let me tell you something about that man. He opened the door, took one look at Zane, still wearing the cape, then looked at me. He sighed. Not just any sigh. First, she left 11 voicemails, each more high-pitched than the last, culminating in a screech about how I had traumatized his spirit and compromised his karmic frequency. Then she texted me a 3-paragraph monologue explaining that I now owed her child support for the voluntary assumption of guardianship. I blocked her. She unblocked herself. I don't even know how. That's the level of metaphysical hacker she is. Then came the Facebook post. She went public. It read, "When you entrust your sacred child with someone you thought was family and they reveal themselves to be a toxic male energy vortex, SMH. Some people just aren't ready to elevate." I don't even know what that means. But someone from her yoga group sent me a glitter bomb labeled "Cleanse Yourself." It exploded on my doorstep. My cat hasn't stopped sneezing since. I found glitter in my cereal, on my toothbrush, and somehow inside my USB ports. My mother texted to ask if I'd apologized yet. I stared at my phone for a full hour before chucking it into the laundry basket and pouring a drink. At this point, I wasn't sure who needed the exorcism more, me or Zane. It's over. Zane is gone. Not like gone. He's just no longer occupying my home, my budget, or the better part of my waking nightmares. As of 2 weeks ago, he settled into his father's place, a man whose default expression is now a mix of stunned silence and spiritual exhaustion. You know, like he just finished a tour in a war zone where the enemies were glitter, sock puppets, and Reiki combat chants. Me? I have peace. Sweet, sacred peace. I lit a candle yesterday and it didn't end up part of a summoning circle. That candle burned all the way down without being turned into dragon breath incense. My cat, Lionel, has started sleeping in visible locations again. President Hoover remains retired, but I think we both agree the trauma was mutual. But just when I thought the chaos had been exorcised, Amanda detonated the nuclear option. The family split. Now, I've got half the family, including my mother, 2 cousins, and my aunt who once dated a man she swears was part dolphin, calling me a heartless jerk who abandoned a child in his time of need. The other half? They're saying what I've been whispering into throw pillows for months. Amanda has always been a narcissistic train wreck riding a wave of spiritual hashtags and emotional absenteeism. My Uncle Ray literally sent me a card that just said, "You did what we were all too scared to do. Godspeed." Amanda, of course, hasn't taken any of this lying down. Since the Craigslist incident, the glitter bomb, and the whole toxic male vortex Facebook saga, she's doubled down. Her new post? A sepia-toned selfie captioned, "The strong must walk alone when the weak crumble under the weight of a child's divine light." She tagged me. Then she started a GoFundMe titled, "Support My Indigobaby's Path to Cosmic Reintegration," with a goal of $20,000 and zero actual explanation. Zane's profile picture is now him holding a stick and wearing face paint. I think he's trying to look like a warlock. Either that or a wizard who lost a bet with a raccoon. But here's the thing. I didn't give up on Zane. Not really. I tried. I gave him everything I had: food, shelter, boundaries, late-night lectures about how my blender is not a tool for alchemy. I lost sleep. I lost money. I lost a perfectly good garden gnome. And I did it for a kid who was never mine, whose actual mother thought parenting was a Pinterest board of essential oils and cryptic metaphors. I did what I thought was best. For my sanity. For my cat. For my bank account. And honestly? For Zane. The kid needs a parent. Not a spiritual concierge. Not a burned-out uncle duct-taping salt circles around his coffee table. A real, consistent, adult human being willing to say, "No, you cannot build a shrine out of used socks and toothpaste." So now it comes down to this, Reddit. Am I the asshole for giving up on parenting someone else's kid when their actual parent refused to show up? Let the comment war begin.